Hello and welcome to Champ Select, your go-to competitive Legends of Runeterra podcast. I'm Alex. As per usual, joining me are my two co-hosts, Noble.
Woo!
And Hugh.
Hello.
And today we have the Last Chance Gauntlet coming up this weekend, which is always an exciting time of the season. Everybody is trying to scramble to either hit the Masters, or some people have resigned themselves to just annihilating the Last Chance Gauntlet. But regardless,
Sorry.
Also me.
Yeah.
but regardless, I think it's important, and I think a lot of people are going to be playing this Last Chance Gauntlet. So I wanted to just go ahead and kind of spend an episode talking about the Last Chance Gauntlet in general, our advice if you're going to play it, prepare for it, etc. And I don't know, I mean, we've addressed the Last Chance Gauntlet format in the past, but I feel like it's been a little while since we've really sat down and talked about it. So I think it's kind of overdue.
And it's also kind of timely because there's like been a little bit, I don't know if y'all picked up on this, there's like a little bit of Twitter drama of like pros being like, it's kind of bull that the thing that qualifies you for Worlds is the not competitive format, which is how they're referring to ladder. Because like I've seen multiple tweets are like, it's kind of weird that this is that. And I even saw like Mo, like Emotional, did tweet that they were like, tweets, I'm not going to try to ladder anymore. Like, I'm going to play the tournaments. I like playing the tournaments, but kind of I'm done with that part of this game. And honestly, you know, I feel, I mean, I'm in I shouldn't say this on air, but I'm in Platinum 2 right now.
You hate to see it.
And,
look away.
And you know, there are a lot of things going on. You know, you don't need to hear my life story right now.
You've been very busy. You have been on a road trip for 2 weeks. So,
yeah.
It's hard to play Legends of Runeterra on a road trip.
It really is. And I'm moving, and like, you know, there are a lot of things going on. But the ladder grind is hard, and not only that, like doing it season in and season out is just like so
exhausting.
Yeah, it really is.
It makes the game kind of not fun.
Yeah, you have to play so much of it. And so then closing time or time now. It was his old name. My new roommate actually, but we had a long talk on the drive down about how he just really doesn't like that you have to learn one deck for ladder and then that you have to learn 3 for the tournaments. Like the fact that there are these 2 formats to think about. And like you can spend all your time trying to get good at ladder, and then like that often doesn't translate into the tournament stuff, which is I think what we're going to hopefully talk about today. Is that like there are very different skills at work here. Like you could be an excellent tournament Legends of Runeterra player and not consistently do well on ladder, and vice versa.
And it's not to say that the skills are not transferable. Like being an excellent ladder player,
there's absolutely overlap.
Is going to help you be an excellent tournament player
100%.
Without a doubt. But, you know, like, and really, I think a lot of it is a difference in deck selection as opposed to deck play. Because, I mean, you're going to play the game, like, generally good. Ideally, every time.
I would certainly hope to play the game good.
I can't imagine playing a matchup that differently, like the same matchup in tournament versus on ladder. You know, you'd probably just play it.
The goal is to win both times.
The goal is to win both times. You're going to do whatever you think is the highest percentage chance to win every time. So, you know, that shouldn't really change anything. But the actual matchups you're playing definitely change a lot between tournament and ladder. So for any of you going into the Last Chance Gauntlet this weekend, last week, me and Hugh were talking, and I said that I'd been practicing a lot of tournaments, and I was determined that I was going to lock in my lineup. This week out, a whole 1 week out, so that this time
and more, right?
A week and a little bit of change, and I'm happy I'm going to have that time because I feel like I'm going to have to do some tuning.
Totally.
But anyway, so here's my lineup, and then I'll go a little bit through my thought process and how I got here. So I plan to be playing Azir Irelia as my Shreema Ionia deck. Gangplank Sejuani, and I blanked. Ezdraven. Thank you. I was like, I told you guys earlier. What did I be saying? Ezdraven. So these 3 decks, I just feel like there's a general consistency here that's really nice. So the first thing that I kind of had to ask myself when I was building a lineup was like, which Ionia Shreema deck did I want to play?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to like narrow in on your comment was like that is like one of the first decisions you have to make.
Yeah.
Kind of like in past, you've been like, what TF deck am I playing? What Aphelios deck am I playing? What Fiora deck am I playing? It's that same kind of thing. Yeah,
it kind of feels like a very relevant choice. And the Sivir decks are so good. And they're really, really consistent, which I think is really important. But I think that this deck is a particularly good tournament deck
Aurelia's here.
Yeah.
Or as Aurelia.
Yeah, I think it gains more in a tournament lineup than it even does on ladder, because a lot of the time people just aren't ready for it, and the people who aren't ready for it often feel the need to ban it. This deck gets banned a lot in tournament lineups, which, it is a pretty good reason in and of itself to bring a particular deck, is that it's going to eat a lot of bans.
I mean, we saw last season how you had to really try to target it, and so if they're a little less a target on its back, it can really do well for you.
Yeah, and Defiant Dance is ridiculous, and the real reason I think I want to bring this deck is because I think it's just so much better positioned against Gangplank Sejuani than the Sivir deck. I mean, the Gangplank Sejuani deck, Sivir can basically never ever beat a leveled Sejuani, like a flip Sejuani. That's just game over for all of the Sivir decks. But the Azir Irelia decks have a better chance to beat the deck early and a better chance to beat the deck if they happen to get a flip Sejuani and play later. So it's just all around a much better matchup, and I just feel like there's going to be a lot of Gangplank Sejuani at this event. It feels like, I mean, Sejuani is just so good right now. Like, Flip Sejuani just feels like she just locks out almost every game she comes down in.
I mean, yeah, that's definitely true. It's insane. Just, you have so many ways to turn on her to proc the board freeze.
Yeah. And that's also the reason why I'm steering clear of Lee Sin decks for this tournament. Is I really wanted to play some, but I decided unless I wanted my plan to be to ban Gangplank Sejuani, or not have to deal with any Sejuani decks, that I just wasn't going to be able to bring a Lee deck. And even if I was banning these Sejuani decks, I just wasn't super confident in having to play Lee against all these Sivir decks or the Azir Irelia decks. It feels like if we don't have Eye of the Dragon, we're kind of hurting basically from the get-go in those matchups. So it just didn't feel that favorable. So I decided that I wanted to play Azir Irelia. On top of that, I just listed a lot of considerations for things that I could not bring to this tournament because I was worried that Gangplank Sejuani just hoses them. And it was 4 or 5 decks, right? Or in a couple entire archetypes that are just I don't want to play those because that deck is so good. It just made me feel like I wanted to play the deck. Yeah, and I'd had a really good experience laddering with it. So those two things, I'd already played the deck a little bit. I was thinking to myself, how is this going to warp a tournament set? And it feels like a lot because Sejuani is just such a game altering card that it feels like it's so good it's even going to alter the pick ban a lot of the time. So,
and then as Raven is one of those decks, and these kind of mid-range decks in general are every time I look at the season results, I'm surprised by lineups that are just 3 good consistent decks piloted by good players. It is. I am far more often surprised by, these people bought these 3 boring decks that I thought might be 49% against the field or whatever, 50% against the field, and they just played them well, way more often than I'm surprised by, wow, that was a crazy lineup that does this nutty thing.
Yeah, and the beauty, one of the beauties of this particular lineup is that Gangplank Sejuani, really mid-rangey, has a lot of game against pretty much the whole field. Ezd Raven, really mid-rangey, has a lot of game against the whole field. And then Azir Irelia gets banned a lot. So it feels like most of the time, I would say most of my matches I'll end up with Azir Irelia banned, and then 2 just pretty good mid-rangey decks that are consistent and that I think I can grind out games with and just take advantage of playing the game slightly better. And I don't know, that feels like it's playing more to my advantages as a player too. I'm not super good at angling the meta and coming in with some weird wacky people are talking about Tom Soraka on Twitter, and I was just no. I'm not going anywhere near any of that. I'm just gonna take my 55% matchups and try and play them well and try and edge them into 58% matchups or whatever, instead of try and take a chance on some kooky deck, because I'm just never I get it wrong most of the time when I take a chance on a kooky deck. Yeah. So,
and it's good to know your strengths as a player. So on that note, Hugh, do you know what you're going to play?
Yes. I am going to play the same thing that I have been playing in the Gauntlet the last couple weeks.
How have you been doing with it?
Last Gauntlet, I just 8-0'd, just straight up.
Beautiful.
Didn't drop a game?
Didn't drop a game.
My God. He's a monster. You better not run into this man in your last chance gauntlet, because
that will be your last chance.
You will have it will be a swift defeat. Yes.
So what is it?
So my lineup is Ezd Raven,
represent
banger,
Thresh Nasus.
I love that deck. I've been wanting to play. I seriously considered playing that deck too. So,
and the third deck is Zoe Lee.
Absolutely. Oh my god!
Absolutely,
of course.
This is the most Hugh lineup I've ever heard.
And so
What?
it's funny. It's funny that you mentioned you being off some decks because of GP Sejuani, because I feel like Thresh Nasus and Zoe Lee are two of those decks.
they are. I think. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I would say so.
And I totally agree with that rationale. My plan is just kind of to ban it most of the time.
Yeah, I mean, ban it seems like a reasonable plan.
And also, the deck has felt inconsistent enough to me when I've played it that I can just kind of beat it sometimes. They'll have a bad draw.
So
some parts of the deck just like don't function.
I do want to address that part of the deck, because I did label these two things as like my consistent mid-range decks, and that really is because like the matchup charts are like pretty reasonable, but the actual deck itself I do think kind of has a slight consistency problem. And that's the main thing that I was like kind of alluding to when I said I had some tuning I wanted to do. And it's trying to work on the consistency of this deck. And I've seen Morpadorp in particular has been doing quite a bit of work. I know. I think he posted something on Twitter where he's been playing a version with Babbling Bjergs. To try and like
draw your champions,
to try and draw the champions a little bit more, to try and find the top end. And I've seen people playing ice shards instead of monkey idols, which
that's smart.
Seems like pretty sick tech to me, especially against Azir Irelia. And I think, I don't know, I'm the deck is already pretty good, I think. And I think if I can put a little bit more thought into the matchups I really need to beat and the matchups that I'm probably going to be banning that were bad already, maybe I can tune the deck a little bit to make it to fix some of those consistency problems in the in the respect of a tournament format, where I can ignore some of the bad matchups and maybe take out some sweepers for consistency or whatever. Maybe I don't need the Dreadway because I'll be banning as Karma. I haven't really flushed all of these out, so that's not necessarily true, but and I don't think I'm going to be cutting the Dreadway from that deck because it's really good. Regardless, you get the point.
Yeah, I
think
do.
I think it's a fixable problem.
I think so too.
I do think it is currently a little inconsistent.
Yeah, I
but
think,
man, when it goes off,
I think it is a fixable problem, and that's the thing that does have me worried, because currently it is a little inconsistent, and I do think that by the time we get to the seasonal, the optimal list or close to the optimal list, with obviously a few flex slots here and there, cards will differ, and that's always true. The optimal list will mostly be found. People will be playing like
people have been trying
38 out of 40 of the same cards.
There's been a lot of like TF Sejuani I've seen too. People have been trying.
Exactly.
Getting Plank, yeah.
I think that people will just sort of figure it out, and that's the scariest thing for my lineup, because
well, I mean, you can just ban it.
I can.
Yeah, that's always the beauty of the format.
Right. And that's why that's one reason why I'm okay with how I've been doing. Another reason is I'm just incredibly comfortable on all three of these decks at this point.
That's so important.
They all feel so good to me. Even with Zoe Lee, obviously, is, as everyone knows who listens ever, it's my favorite deck.
It's the best.
Even when it's bad, it's still good in tournament.
Yep.
That's the caveat. In tournament, sometimes it is objectively terrible on ladder.
It is. Well, it actually has an above 50% win rate on ladder right now.
Oh, I know. It's been good recently.
Yeah.
It's been popular.
This is the high time, ladies.
Right.
This is the golden age. We're above 50%.
Exactly.
We made it.
Yeah.
We did it.
Well, we were all playing this deck at 49%. Why aren't we playing it now?
Imagine it now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Thresh Nasus is just a deck that I think I didn't even see it in the Cosmic Meta report. Like people aren't playing
Viego is really taking Nasus's spot. And in kind of a big way. I wanted to talk about Viego too, actually.
Yeah.
Because Viego was an archetype that I seriously considered. And I went into thinking pretty highly about it, about just like the Viego decks in general, where they were positioned. They can go pretty big. It's really hard for Ezreal decks in general to deal with them. And man, that deck, speaking of inconsistent, I had just the most ridiculous. I had like the worst experience with that deck. The Viego shell just felt so bad to me. I just felt like I drew like all my top end in one game. And, I definitely think I just got a little bit unlucky. But, like, even in the games where it felt like I had a reasonably powerful draw, it felt like if my Viego got killed, like, I just kind of got, like, swept off the face of the earth immediately. And maybe I was playing bad, like, that I shouldn't have been able to let my Viego be killed in these situations or whatever. But a lot of the time, it just felt like I was so far behind, I had to go for things. So, like, I really considered Thresh Nasus because I just, like, have not been super happy with the Viego decks in general.
I think so I had a similar thought because they seem at face value pretty similar. Like they seem like you're trying to power up a big thing and then you win with it. But it feels the decks just feel very different. They have played, for me at least, very, very differently. And Thresh Nasus just feels so consistent. Like I almost never, ever get draws where I just sort of lose the game. Like that almost never happens. And when it does happen, it's pretty much always because I mulliganed like an idiot.
Yep.
And that totally happens sometimes, and I'm okay with that. Like
there's some operator error going on occasionally. Yeah,
exactly. And Nasus is still just good. It's just a powerful
He's so
card.
good. Yeah.
People aren't prepared for the deck, I don't think.
I mean, other than Sejuani, like existing,
Right.
But like,
Exactly.
in a tournament, you could deal with that, like we said. So like,
Yeah.
I think it's a much better deck in tournament than it is on ladder too. And I've also considered playing it on ladder quite a bit. Like I've been like this close to whipping it out after I like lost to a Zerelia like 3 or 4 times in a row.
Yeah.
My Viego experience is a big part of why I'm still in platinum. I just like the decks felt good. It felt like you just needed to figure out the early game, and it felt like the like Scourge Deathmark thing was not it. And like
No.
the Thresh Nasus has like this awesome early game where it just like, murders you with Ravenous Butcher sometimes, and this deck just doesn't do that at all. But it will win late games harder, but it just like never wins an early game.
Yeah, it just feels too inconsistent. And I think it's really got this, and I mean, the deck's not bad. The deck is pretty good, but it just feels so good when you go off in the late game that it feels like you kind of like forget about all those times you just like lost because your early game was too bad.
Sounds like an abusive relationship.
a little bit. Well, in true Viego.
I'm being Viego's gaslighting me.
Yeah.
I mean, it's okay. Have you seen him?
It's like, remember the good times.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, I will.
Yeah. So I'm steering away from the Viego decks, but I do think I'm probably going to be banning them.
Yeah, I'm
A lot
mostly
of
still
the
in it for
time
his dog
with my-
the Hydravine.
Oh, yeah. That card
Good dog.
slaps.
He's a good boy.
Good dog.
Yeah, good boy.
Yeah, the Hydravine is just kind of insane, and I'm terrified of that card. But all 3 of my decks can beat the Hydravine.
That's good.
So
Yeah, I was gonna say like Sejuani seems like it can beat it, but like once a Hydravine gets going, it is absolutely insane how hard it is to ever like 2/2 and then a 3/3 and then a 4 like every turn.
It just gets so big. And
What?
if they've played one of those Kamarovan myths earlier, like it just takes off. If they play a Viego and that, it's over. Like they're just so big, so fast, and there's so many of them. And then Viego flips and it's a nightmare. Yeah. You can't deal with it. So anyway, I think that I'm pretty excited for the Last Chance Gauntlet. Now that we've talked a little bit about what we're actually going to be playing in the event, I want to talk a little bit about the strategy
of like the event itself.
Of the event itself, yeah. So the format, real quick, it's best of 3. You bring 3 decks. You ban 1, obviously. I want to talk a little bit about the like actual like pick and ban strategies that exist in this format because they're pretty interesting, and there's a lot to talk about that goes into the ban phase, and it feels like the ban phase can honestly like determine a match a lot of the time.
Oh yeah, I've definitely had rounds where I look at my opponent's 3 decks and I think to myself, well, this is probably where I take a loss. And then because I'm like, oh well, obviously you're gonna ban this deck, and you're like, there's no way, like this is just the right choice every single time. And then they don't ban the deck you're thinking they will. And you're like, wait a second. Now my matchup is great against you. Like in this last gauntlet that I played, something that I hadn't thought about that my lineup was very weak to was Aesol.
Aesol just kind of
Demacia Targon.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because, Hush.
Hush is so good.
Hush is brutal, and
Sometimes,
that deck does very well into Ezdraven.
Yep.
And so really all he had to do was ban my Thresh Nasus, and suddenly it's looking real rough for me.
Yeah, totally.
And he just didn't ban that. He
And
banned
then-
Ezdraven, and I was like, why would you
Ever do that? Yep.
That doesn't make any sense. And I don't remember the other two decks, but just say that the other two decks made the Ezdraven ban more egregious. I wish I could remember exactly what it was.
Yeah, I think the first and important like key to think about is what your opponent is going to ban. Because you can look at your 3 decks and look at their 3 decks and be like, well, 2 of my decks get hosed by deck 1. So I have to ban deck 1 because it hoses 2 of my decks. But if for example, that your opponent is going to have to ban one of your decks that gets hosed by deck 1, maybe you don't have to ban it anymore or whatever. And it's really hard to visualize this, especially in a podcast or whatever, where we just we don't really have the visual medium to try and show or give specific examples. And so it's hard to speculate, and every single decision is different. But I think it's important to basically, you're trying to mind game your opponent into an advantageous position. At the end of the day, there's a bunch of levels of thinking where you can go down a bunch of different rabbit holes and end up, trying to ban this weird kooky deck because you think your opponent is going to ban this deck because you thought they were going to ban that deck, or, whatever. But at the end of the day, the best thing you can do is just end up with a above 50% chance to have a good matchup in your rounds.
On your first time, or like you mean both?
Yeah,
Yeah.
You want a blanket above 50%.
Yeah.
Right?
So how would you all make decisions, like if you're looking at a lineup, and let's just say, let's just take your lineup for example, right? We have Ezreal, we have Gangplank Sejuani, and we have Azir Aurelia. And let's say we have 2 decks. Our opponent has 2 decks that are each great against one of our decks and even against and bad against the other 2, and then one great deck that's pretty even into your lineup. How would you let's just think that out on air as a kind of way to
Sure. So in this world we're trying to think about the do we want to take more risks? Do we want to ban a deck that has a good matchup and a bad matchup, or 2 good matchups and 1 bad matchup, versus a deck that's medium across the field? It really depends. You're probably never banning the deck that's medium across the field.
Yeah, I've noticed that. I look at a lot of lineups and I'm like, okay, they might be slightly favored. I might be slightly favored in most of the matchups. And then it's all right. Usually, so the easiest thing you can check for me first is you look at their decks and you're like, okay, do they have a common weakness to one of my decks? And this is why it's great nice thing about playing online tournaments, if you have 2 monitors or can just tab out and just look at a matchup table and be like, those matchup tables aren't perfect, but you're looking at similar data to your opponent is usually. So you can be like, oh, do they have a sub 50 against, is there one of their decks that is one of my decks that is better than 50% against all of their decks? And you can reasonably assume that that's going to get banned.
Yeah. That's the easy
level
mode.
1. Yeah.
That's what you hope happens, because then it's easy, because your opponent doesn't actually have a choice to make, because unless in their world, if you're your opponent and you're looking at a lineup and they have 1 deck,
that's
all
good against
3
all your
decks, all 3 of your decks are bad against it, is there's no way you're ever going to have above 50% chance to in your matches if you leave them with that deck, no matter what they ban.
Yeah, you're going to have a game that you are not advantaged.
So that's a
to
forced ban.
Yeah.
And if you're on the other side of that interaction, you need to know that is a forced ban, which means that you need to ban knowing that deck is going to get banned. So, let's use Azir Aurelia in this example. Let's say Azir Aurelia is good against all 3 of my opponent's decks. I know that my opponent will be banning Azir Aurelia.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ban the deck that is the best against Ezdraven and GP Sejuani. And I can just think about those 2. And as soon as you can make an assumption about what you think your opponent should ban, you get to think about your lineup in terms of just the 2 decks. And I mean, we've talked on air a lot about how much easier it is to think about a lineup in terms of 2 decks than 3. So once you can think about your lineup in terms of 2 decks because you think you know what your opponent's going to ban, it becomes really easy to logic it out and think out a ban, I think, at least.
Right. And another thing to note is that a lot of people will try and go down this thing of, well, if they know I'm going to ban this, then they'll anticipate that they'll ban that, and they'll try and go back and forth and mind game a lot, and that is almost always a bad idea.
Yeah, it's pretty risky.
Especially when the meta is this open, like when people are just like all of the decks just seem like pretty good. Like in the past, when you're like playing Thresh Nasus, TLC, Zoe Lee into Thresh Nasus, TLC, Zoe Lee, you look at that and you're like, very limited things that we do here. Like we just banned TLC or whatever.
Yeah, we know what we're doing.
Yeah.
We've thought about this.
Yeah, but in a meta that's this open where all of these decks are decent, you're just so much more likely to see 3 random decks that are like decent.
And it also
like this
requires both of you to have the same like opinion based on the same knowledge. Your opponent and you can end up in completely different spaces as to what they think they should be banning, entirely just because you think Ezdraven beats Azir Irelia and your opponent thinks Azir Irelia beats Ezdraven or whatever.
Yeah, totally.
Like just that one difference in your guys' logic could lead you down a completely different rabbit hole. And if you end up on the 3rd level of that rabbit hole and your opponent's just like on level 1 and they just like ban your good deck and you just like punt away the match, you're going to feel like an idiot. I really don't recommend it.
Yeah, you don't need to get too clever with it. Just like at base level, just ban the deck you're probably worst against.
And honestly, I want to say, like, if you look at a deck and you're like, damn it, I haven't played against Tom Raka all season, just ban it. That deck is kind of hard to play against.
You can save yourself.
Yeah, you can not know how your decks do against a deck and be like, all right, I'm going to panic ban that. I've panic banned random Targon's Peak decks before, and it was good. I was like, no, thank you. Don't want to think about that deck at all.
Is everybody out there ready for Draven Riven? I hope everybody, or Zed Lulu.
Yeah,
I hope
Zed
you guys
Lulu
are.
is actually
that
like,
deck is terrifying.
Is Draven Riven like Draven Fizz?
No, it's kind of similar-ish. Okay. Yeah, it's actually, yes, it's quite similar.
I had sex. I had success with that deck on ladder. I'm tired, guys. I have had so little sleep over the past 7 days. I'm like sipping a coffee.
So,
Fizz gave me the eyes and it was over.
Something that I wanted.
I hope you guys are ready for Draven Riven. That's all.
Yeah, something that I wanted to touch on was that you can look at a matchup table, but don't be super beholden to that, because there will be times where, let's say for a moment that we have a favored matchup. I'm playing Thresh Nasus, they're playing Azrelia. Thresh Nasus has like a 58% to beat that deck, something like that.
Yeah, it's a very good matchup.
Very good matchup.
Might even be higher.
Maybe, I think
it was higher in the past.
We'll say 60 for make the numbers easy. It has a 60% chance to beat Azrelia. But let's say for a moment, I have played 0 games against Azrelia all season. I've just no idea how to play against that deck. And then there's another matchup that I'm looking at that is 50-50, completely even.
Playing Thresh Nasus as Draven.
Right.
Straight up down the middle.
Yeah. Hate to break it to you, you aren't favored. If you've never played, it doesn't matter what the matchup table says. If you've never played the matchup, you aren't favored.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of bringing consistent decks.
Oh,
is
yeah,
that
absolutely.
If you are comfortable with your consistent deck, you get to gain those advantage points.
Yep.
You get to be the one that necks in that EV. You just get to sit there with your big Ezreal Draven net, and you just get to rope them in slowly. All these people drowning that are like, I have no idea how to deal with Sejuani too.
Yeah. Yep.
And also, this is a less common scenario, but there are a decent amount of times where matchup data is not as correct as we think it is in general. Like people just the decks haven't existed for long enough. Like GP Sejuani is a very good example. This deck came into existence, 10 days ago?
Zed Lulu. I heard about
week.
that deck last night for the first time and logged on this morning, played against it, and then played some games with it for the first time. That deck is so crazy good too.
I played, I saw it against me in the Gauntlet. And I just insta-banned it. I was like, I know what that deck's going to try and do, and I'm not prepared.
Yeah, for the record, for everybody in the audience, that deck absolutely hoses everything Ionia Shurima. Excuse me. Hoses everything Ionia Shurima.
And Alex's allergies are doing a similar thing to him.
Yeah. Imagine me as the Azir Irelia player in that analogy. and it's pretty good against Gangplank Sejuani, but it just gets absolutely worked by Ezreal decks, basically removal decks with good removal spells. So like that was kind of another reason why I like locked. I was already thinking about playing as Draven, but I kind of like locked in as Draven once I saw this deck gaining some popularity, because I was like, I don't want to have to ban this thing on site every time, but I might just have to, depending on what's coming with it. I think there could be some really good lineups with that deck.
Oh, absolutely. There's some really
yeah.
That strategy is very
the triple
powerful.
aggro got a lot better with that deck's existence.
And that particular brand of aggro too, like set it alongside
really
with a Fizz deck, just evasive aggro like Jinx Lulu. It's similar to Jinx Lulu.
I think it's much better than Jinx Lulu.
Oh,
actually.
I agree.
I think that like Lulu Zed, like Draven Riven, and like Sivir Action or whatever could be like a legitimately terrifying lineup.
Or Fizz TF.
Yeah, like something like that. Like you could really like you could absolutely be playing Fizz TF and this elusive stack and like really put people to the test.
Yeah. Like as soon as you mentioned that kind of elusive stuff, it just like I was reminded how many more times I've lost to TF Fizz since it got nerfed in tournaments than since it was good. And that's because there weren't that many tournaments where it was legal as its best version. But like that deck keeps popping out of the win rate and beating people. And like that strategy is very good. Like I played some Draven Fizz on ladder, and boy, can people not beat the 4 mana burst speed 5 damage because you put it on an elusive unit. Like,
nope. I guess that brings me to a point I wanted to bring up. And so with the Last Chance Gauntlet, obviously only the first 400 and some or 328 328 players can qualify. Do you think that you need to employ a different strategy if you have 0 prime glories than you do if you have a few already? Like, do you think that if you're listening to this, if I'm listening to this podcast right now and I have 0 prime glories, but I want to play this weekend, like, do you think that I need to play 3 aggro decks to try to win in time?
That is a very good question. And I believe the answer is no. But there are factors. I think the answer is no for me.
Okay.
Because I'm not like you. I don't play at the speed of a glacier.
Yeah. I am sloth.
Yeah. I don't play super fast.
You'd be amazed how long it takes me to windmill slam my Blossoming Blades in a Zero Irelia.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah. You rope and think about it and they're like, well, do I want to? But anyway.
Yeah.
I play reasonably fast, so I'm not super afraid of just playing 3 decks that I want to play that are generally slower. I also know, for me, that I don't play as well with most aggro decks than I do with mid-rangey control decks in the Gauntlet. At the end of the day, you need to win your games. It doesn't matter how fast your games are if you are bad at the decks you're playing and lose your games with them.
Losing a round is going to be way slower than playing slow and winning all your
Do you have a loss to give?
I
haven't played it.
It's the like expedition format or this like normal gauntlet format.
You actually
have to
like
lose twice.
3 losses to give. So
as long as you don't do them twice in a row. Yeah,
exactly.
I think I'm going to play aggro decks if I get a chance to do it. I'm still in the process of moving in, all that. But and I'm pretty sure if I play, I'm going to play Draven Fizz, Lulu Zed, and then something else. I don't know what the third one is.
I probably just played this like a Sivir deck or a Zero Irelia.
Okay, a Zero Irelia is probably it.
Seems like really good.
Yeah. But the other reason I think that I know that it's possible is because I just did it last season. I played this exact lineup that I'm about to play.
You love to see it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
sounds about right.
I went, so I started up, I started the Last Chance Gauntlet at the moment it opened.
Yeah.
I won all my rounds, and I did still get waitlisted. I wish I could see my exact position on the wait,
right?
But I made it in.
Yeah.
And I want to be clear and say that if you are waitlisted, you should absolutely stick around and see if you get in the tournament, because your chances are higher than you think.
It happens so often. Yeah.
A lot of people, life gets in the way.
Sometimes you just wake up and you just can't play the tournament you were going to play that day.
And another time, people just forget. It's really easy to forget.
It's really easy to like just sleep through your alarm or whatever.
Yep. And the third thing is some people just don't feel like it on the day. They're like, you know what? Do I really want to spend the entire Saturday playing 9 rounds of Legends of Runeterra? And sometimes that answer is no.
Yeah. And those people are weak. And they don't deserve.
And they are eliminated in round 0 like the rest of the chumps.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't play last season, so I really can't say anything about that one. But
there's no room for weaklings in the
is there
seasonal.
Is there anything else? There's room for ducklings though.
Yes,
ducklings do all right.
Ducklings do all right.
It's like a pro player named Duckling.
Oh, okay.
He's won one, right?
He's pretty good. Yeah.
No, like he won.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
He's really it was a good joke. He just didn't get it.
I don't know the names of most people.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that was actually something that we wanted to touch on, both in the Last Chance Gauntlet and in the seasonal. You're going to play against good players. You're going to play against pros. You're going to play against people you recognize. I remember in the seasonal, all of the people I played against in the last 4 rounds of the last seasonal I played were all top 200 Masters players. Most of them were names I recognized. And honestly, it Legends of Runeterra being online makes it easier for me to play against really good players. In a Magic tournament, in person, sitting down across from someone you've watched win giant tournaments, you're like, oh my God, he's watching my play. He's gonna think I'm an idiot. He's gonna think I'm bad. But the anonymity of the screen makes it a lot easier for me to just
it makes it a lot easier to not freak out when your opponent isn't there to talk shit about you to your face.
Yeah.
when you're about to do a thing in Magic and your opponent's like, you sure you want to do that? You're like, oh my God, why did you say that?
Do I want to do that? I have no idea now. Yeah, it's terrifying.
If you like that, if you really love that feeling, you should play poker. If you really love people being like, you're an idiot at the table.
You're a bluff.
Boy, do I have the game for you.
Tournament nerves in general, I think, are a very real thing. They're real in the Last Chance Gauntlet. They're very real in the seasonal tournament. And we've talked about tournament nerves in general before. Highly recommend just closing your eyes and breathing. You've got a long timer. Don't be afraid to use it. I'm a proponent of really using the timer. I really mean it. You've got 50 minutes to play your match. Think through your decisions, especially if you feel yourself being nervous. Your mind can calm yourself down and focus in on it if you take the 30 seconds to breathe and then start your thought process clearly.
Totally.
If you're playing against good players, you got to remember that at the end of the day, it's not a good player. It's still a Azir Irelia. You're still gonna beat Azir Irelia the same way you would anybody else playing Azir Irelia.
Yeah, it'll just be a little harder, but that's okay.
You just have to trust your matchup knowledge. You have to trust that remember at the end of the day that you can gain knowledge from your opponent. Knowing that your opponent is a good player is valuable knowledge. You should use to your advantage, especially if you're somebody that the players won't know. If you aren't a consistent top 100 Masters player or whatever, odds are if you queue into Majin Bay, he won't recognize your in-game tag.
Yeah.
That's okay. You can use that to your advantage because if you make some weird play, he might just assume you're bad. And if he makes some weird play,
you
should know that there's something up, right?
Yeah.
A certain level of being good is not making these plays so obvious because you'll expect your opponents to be good. But every little piece of information you can get, you should use to your advantage.
Absolutely.
So.
That's super funny that you made that exact example because my next example was going to be the same, but kind of arguing in the opposite direction.
Was it also going to be Majin Bay, or was it just going to be a similar example?
It was actually going to be Majin Bay, but that's only because I happen to have 100% win rate against Majin Bay. I've only played against him one game.
Well, we keep those stats, though.
One game.
One game.
It was on ladder. I just randomly looked up at the name. I was like, oh shit.
Clean up his deep.
Yeah.
But I was going to say that if you see a really good player, someone you recognize, someone you know, so maybe someone you see stream, just a big name, and they do something, and they do something that
I
you're
would never make a mistake in a game.
Yeah,
there must be a greater reason for it.
Yeah, exactly. So if you see them do something weird, and you're like, why would they ever do something like that? Mm-hmm. It could just be a mistake.
Yeah,
people.
Fair.
These good players absolutely make mistakes.
Yeah.
The best players in the world have made heinous misplays.
I would go so
Absolutely,
far as to say that the best players in the world have had tournaments where they've made a mistake every game. Honestly, this game is hard enough that I wouldn't be surprised if there is the argument that someone made a mistake, that in 98% of games played, both players made a mistake.
Oh, without a doubt.
The game is ridiculously hard.
Yeah. And, that's the other thing is that, just because you recognize a name does not mean that they aren't suffering from the same like tournament nerves that you are too.
Yeah, totally.
Like the pressure is real and exists on everyone, especially the better you're doing in a tournament. You're sitting there at 3-0, 4-0 in the seasonal, 3-0, the last round of the Last Chance Gauntlet. You're feeling the pressure. Of course your opponent is feeling the pressure too. And you can use that to your advantage. You can do some kind of weird passes that will put your opponent in a really hard spot where they have to make, game losing decisions that are kind of hard to make in those heat of the moment situations, right? Where you can try to gain small advantages by knowing that your opponents are going to be naturally taking less risks. These are kind of concepts from poker that apply in late stage poker tournaments that I found really well apply to Legends of Runeterra too. So
absolutely. So that's about all I want to say about the tournaments. Do y'all have any last thoughts about Last Chance Gauntlet?
The one thing I wanted to say about this topic about good players was that this is more about mistakes in general. You're allowed to make mistakes, like we said. Everyone's going to make them.
I give you permission.
You listener,
now.
Don't try to not make mistakes ever. Don't hyper focus on that. Try to make your mistakes way less impactful because you're going to make them. Mistakes are going to happen. No matter what, it's going to happen, and just try to make them less bad.
That's kind of what I was getting at when I was like, feel free to take your time. You will make a mistake, but the odds that you make a game-losing mistake when you think everything through twice are so much lower, right? Like if you just take the extra 10 seconds before you play your card every time,
then maybe you won't get excited your own Aphelios.
Yeah, you might not get excited your own Aphelios. You might not, forget that they have a Gangplank in their hand that you have to thermogenic beam and that you can't thermogenic beam this Dreadway or whatever, it's easy to make those mistakes. It's even easier to catch yourself before you make them if you just take the time to think about it and do it. And it's not worth it a lot of the time on the ladder, but it is a really good tournament habit. And as a professional tanker, that is my piece of wisdom. Yeah. Use the tank to your advantage.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to tank. Embrace the tank.
Yeah, totally. All right, so do we want to move on to questions?
Yeah, I think it's probably a good time to advance to our questions, starting with our question of the week. This one comes from Dragon, and they ask, what kind of decision-making in this game separates a good player from a bad player?
I was wondering, I was actually not sure how that question was going to end. I was wondering if it was going to be good and great,
Yeah, good and bad, interestingly enough. Because we do a lot of talking about the difference between good and great here.
Yeah.
But I don't think we do a lot of talking about the remedial card game class.
Wow.
Yeah, card games for dummies.
Yeah. So, okay. So what makes a bad Legends of Runeterra player? That's an interesting question.
Yeah, it is.
So the first thing I jump to when I think of what a bad player would look like is when they make a play that for multiple reasons that you can name off the top of your head is always wrong 100% of the time. It is objectively incorrect. There's no reason. There's not a single card in their deck, not a single interaction in their deck that makes what they did make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For example,
there are some plays that are objectively bad.
Yeah, don't just cast Guiding Touch for no reason. People do that way too often.
Yeah,
you can just and they're sitting
especially
at
when
3 spell
you're not
mana.
wasting your mana. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. They're sitting on 3 spell mana. Then nothing's going to change. Yeah. The Guiding Touch is going to do the same thing next turn. Just don't do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
For me, I think it is. I wouldn't say this is necessarily bad, but I think what's when someone crosses the line to a good Legends of Runeterra player is when they make plays based on meta knowledge outside of what is physically necessarily happening in the game, knowledge, and that is not meta in the terms of what is the Legends of Runeterra meta like. It's you making decisions based on what kind of cards are in your opponent's deck, what kind of cards you think are in their hand based on how they've played, trying to represent cards in your deck, knowing about what kind of cards they play, as opposed to just being like, they have a 2/2, I'm going to play a 3/3. Like thinking ahead about what they could do, what their deck is capable of doing, what this matchup is supposed to look like. That is when that jump in thinking, when you start to think about the game like that, and this is something that I find in myself when I go from playing passively to playing actively, like when I'm like playing on my phone watching a TV show, like I'm not necessarily doing this nearly as much as I should have. Maybe that's why I'm in platinum. But that jump is what really like when you're kind of in that gear is the direction that you want to be going, and I think decides who wins a lot of games of Legends of Runeterra.
I think you knocked this one out of the park. I was going to say something very similar. I think the difference in decision making in particular.
Yeah.
I think the difference between a good and bad player is the decision making between a bad player is making decisions based on what they have and what is optimal for their deck, and I think the good players are making decisions based off of what they have and what their opponent could have.
And the matchup and like, I can't play this because if it gets vulnerable, it's awful. Or if he plays Sivir, it's awful.
Yeah,
because,
that's when it feels like you're really unlocked the game.
Totally.
You now understand
unlocked.
the base mechanics. Well, you understand the concept of card advantage, health management, resource management, well enough to put those ideas together and try and have a battle of wits with your opponent.
Craft a game.
Craft a game plan against your opponent's game plan where you both know what's going on and like you can make decisions based on the fact that you both know what's going on and try to go to like deeper and deeper levels.
Totally.
Yeah, I think you have to get to that point. I think that's what
Absolutely.
makes you a good Legends of Runeterra player.
Totally. No. This is a good question. I like
it was. Our next question comes from Jero Jr. They ask, what do you think is the most fun deck that's at least somehow competitive? For you guys, obviously, it's fun is subjective. So I can start. I think that it's Lee Zoe for me. It's either that or Sivir.
Lee apologist?
Yeah.
How dare you?
I really like these Sivir decks. I think they're so much fun. I just love the tempo-y style of them.
Yeah.
So I really like those decks, but I do still think my favorite deck of all time is Lee Zoe. So I think that's my answer.
I don't branch out and play trash very much.
Trash, yeah. For me, I think it's these elusive decks, like the Fizz Drafen decks.
Yeah.
It is so fun to just be like, well, they're dead to the cards in my hand. Should I go for it now? Should I go for it later? You idiots are playing 5 mana at slow speed for your decimates, and I'm just playing 2 mana Brothers Bonds and just pow, pow, pow.
Yeah, just blasting it.
And
at
it's
people.
just I don't know. I just think it's interesting. I've killed a lot of people with that Minotaur card that gives you an extra attack that turn with a unit.
Oh,
Good
yeah.
times. Good times.
I think my my most fun bad deck or suboptimal deck, whatever you want to say, is anything that the most recent iteration of this is Noxus Shadow Isles Burn. Just anything that's burn.
Ooh,
anything
burn.
that's you take every card that says deal damage and you put it in.
I don't understand you.
It's
How can that be your favorite?
because you sit there.
Oh my god.
Because you sit there and your opponent plays creatures and they're all better than your creatures. And you're like, huh? They're just there's literally zero.
My deck sucks. Yeah.
You're just 2, 3,
hurt me.
4. That's 9. Guess you're dead.
He loves first grade math because when they added Astro Fox, it felt like he got promoted to second grade math.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, that's less than 3. You can't block.
The deck I am talking
Frenzied
about,
Skitterer.
it plays 3 Astral Foxes. So plays 3 Astral Foxes, 3 Decimates, 3 Noxian Fervors. I don't. Other cards that do 3 Imperial Demolitionists.
All the ones
It is
that do
fun to
damage,
hurt your own dudes to go face. That is
I do enjoy those cards, yeah. And I am a big fan of Stalking Shadows in general. Stalking Shadows Doom Beast does never get old.
The Stalking Shadows nerf hit this deck hard. I will say
it sucks. Yeah,
2 mana burst, draw 2 is so fun, but so
good.
3 is so much
Way
worse.
too good. Yeah. All right. Our next question comes from Juxta. They ask, you guys talked about dual region cards. What about the idea of regionless cards?
The colorless.
So I'm going to just no.
Just
Don't-
straight no.
Just don't do it. Just do not. I do not want that for this game ever.
I actually hard agree here. I don't think that there's any reason to print cards that can go into any deck in this game because the champions and the cards and the mechanics are so diverse, and I want them to be so diverse because it feels like it accentuates the differences and the like cool abilities that all the characters have, which I feel like is a core part of the game, is like making the champions and their abilities feel cool. And so like just like adding that general layer of like gray over the whole thing, like I don't want to have to play around, this 2-mana 3/3 that's in every deck every time.
Yeah. So
whatever.
My reasoning for this is the neutral cards. That's what I'm gonna call them, neutral cards, because that's what they're called in Hearthstone. Sure. Neutral cards, things can go regionless in this case.
Can go in any deck.
It seems like they go one of two ways. Either the card's really good and it's neutral, it's regionless, so it goes in every deck.
Yeah. Or most decks even. Yeah.
Or 80-90%.
No, it's like the Culling Strike where like most decks play it, right? And then
exactly. Too many decks want this card all of a sudden. Or you have the rest of the cards that aren't as good, and suddenly like there's probably just a better option in your region.
Yeah, you're going to have to pay a real cost to get out of region effects in your region, in theory, or they're just going to be overtuned. And I don't want either of those things to happen.
Because one, we're diluting the region's identities by allowing them access to things they don't normally have access to. And two, we're just opening the door to a bunch of cards that are very frequently either a little too good or a little too bad.
Enough, yeah.
And it's
like I can't think of a middle ground example in a card game. Like I really can't, of like a colorless card that I was like, this one is perfect.
Right.
And there are like some hate pieces, right? But Legend of Runeterra doesn't have the kind of like combo decks crazy synergies that like, I don't think Stony Suppressor needs to be in every color. Like I'm not that worried about it. So yeah.
Yeah. And the reason for that is because a medium card that's neutral is bad.
Yeah,
almost always. Like I can't.
Absolutely.
That's just because that's the nature of the regionless cards. If a card is just medium and just okay, it's never going in a deck because there should almost always be a card that's better than it. Yeah. And the card that is better than it is probably in a region you want to be in, because if those two cards do similar things, that region is probably good at doing that thing.
Yeah, the thing you want to be doing anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The only cards that like the best cards like this are cards like for Legend of Runeterra would be Passage Unearned, like a card that is very specific to like a specific circumstance, and like that card could be regionless and it wouldn't matter, and like we don't need hate pieces like that in Legends of Runeterra. That's just kind of my take on it.
I agree. All right, our next question comes from Keon Spy. On a similar vein, I suppose, they say, with dual region cards as a possibility, how would you like to be able to play up to 3 different regions in one deck? And follow up, what would your 3-region deck look like? Okay, I guess I can start. 1, Alex would love to be able to play 3 regions in a deck because I can do some sweet things that I've never been able to do. Other Alex thinks that that's great and Alex should go do that in a lab or the old Singleton Gauntlet. Yeah. Because it's probably complete nonsense. And I think the game has just been balanced for too long around it being 2 regions, and it would open up way too many possibilities and be so hard to balance that I just don't think the game needs that. And if it does need that, I don't think it needs it for a very long time. Totally. But I would love a game mode where I could play 3-region decks and try and brew some sweet stuff. I'd probably play some like Draven with Targon for like star shaping in the Invoke package, so like I could like actually.
Oh, you want to
win
be
the
even
game.
Slower and clunkier?
I want to be able to actually win the game. No.
I see. I see. That makes sense.
Get some Radiant. Oh, maybe Demacia for like healing and Radiant Guardian. Draven with like single combats and stuff.
Yeah. I agree. Like there are some concepts that are like not quite there, like Draven and Demacia decks. Like it's something we haven't seen, and like if you got to play like some of the good, 1-drops from. Yeah, that's a good example. Like some of the weird tribal things, like, Poros or one drop tribal getting to play like the Noxus 1-drops, Professor Von Yip, and the payoff cards in Bilgewater would like let you actually do that. And I do think that would be cool for like an event. But I think the game doesn't need it, but it would be a really cool lab, like a really cool like Eternal format, kind of like how Magic has Legacy, where everything's legal. Just kind of more of a Wild West of a format could be really cool.
Yeah, I would love to see a like regionless lab where you could just put any card in your deck. That'd be kind of cool.
Oh, that would be
super fun, and it should definitely stay in lab because the moment, because like you said, this game isn't balanced for that, and the moment we see the game allow 3 regions in a deck in a competitive format is things have been bad. I don't know what has been going on in the game to allow that, but that's like blowing up the world level of meta shifting. Like they're desperate, I feels like, if they ever do that. And
totally.
Yeah, the game's not built for it, and it absolutely shouldn't happen outside of.
Could be cool if the third region gave you a third champion, so you can play like Azirelia and also MF.
Oh God!
Oh yeah, you could have 9 champs. That'd be cool.
Yeah.
All right. Our last question for the day comes from Snot Info Blah. They ask, "What's the spiciest deck a player will make top 32 with?"
Oh, Lulu Teemo.
Ooh.
Okay.
So like Lulu Zed, but
with Teemo even lower.
Even lower.
What is Lulu Zed's second region? I'm sorry, I haven't
it's
played against
Demacia.
the deck yet. Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's Ionia
Oh my God,
Demacia.
weird.
It's playing like Fleet Feather Tracker and like Sharp Sight, Golden Aegis.
Lulu Teemo is actually a deck I was thinking about. I've realized
seen
in my
Teemo
head.
Zed.
Like Teemo Zed, the elusive burn deck was exactly what I was
Zed
thinking.
stock is at an
Basically, the
all-time
thought
high.
process being it's just extra low to the ground as opposed to Lulu Jinx. It's just the same. Like you just have another 1/1 elusive for one.
Yeah, totally. And like you can Kinku Wayfinders for some Teemos.
Yeah,
I'm gonna go with. I've got a couple predictions. I think there will be at least one deep deck. Top 32. At least one.
Yeah.
I think that somebody will make it in with Echo Zillion. I think that we'll see. I think that we'll see one copy of Echo Zillion.
I agree.
Or one copy of Infinite.
Infinite
the Infinite card deck.
Okay.
I think there might be a spicy Viego brew. We're like, oh, that makes sense. Like they did it. They like figured out that the thing that you need to do is play single combat on your mists so that you can actually kill stuff or whatever. Right.
Sounds pretty good.
Yeah. And I think that like it's not going to be super spicy, but I think it's going to be cool, Or maybe I'm gonna maybe walk that back. Maybe just Targon's Peak from Dragon again. Just bet on the horse.
Targon's Peak. Oh God.
What do you think? Oh, did you already say yours?
I already said
You've
mine.
gotten there before.
Crazy.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that brings us to the end of this episode. Unless anybody has any final thoughts they want to say. Good luck to everybody in the Last Chance Gauntlet this weekend. Let us know if you play either of our lineups, if they treat you well, or don't tell me if you like play my lineup and then it goes horribly.
Yeah.
Or do tell me so that I can bail in time.
Totally.
for the seasonal.
And I'm going to be over here trying to play like a Teemo Wayfinder deck and the Lulu Demacia deck and Fizz and just do some really nonsense elusive shit.
That sounds dope.
I try. I don't have a
wish
lot
you
of
the best.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much time I have because I have some family visiting, so I'm just going to try to
just try and jam it out.
Whack 'em.
Be the first one done.
Or first one, I want to win. I want to go for a 5-0 or 0-2. So
yeah,
sounds
that's
like a good
the
lineup.
goal. Yeah. Alrighty, so I want to thank you all for listening to this week's episode of Champ Select. If you aren't a member of our Discord already, you should absolutely join. That's where we get our questions for the week every week in case you have any questions you want to ask us before the upcoming seasonal tournament, not this week, but the week after. So I'm sure we're going to be talking all things seasonal lineup next week, preparing for that. So if you're interested in that, make sure to check it out next week. Follow our socials. Those are all in the description of whatever platform you're listening to this on. And we will see you all in the next episode of Champ Select. Bye-bye.